Hello everybody and welcome back to the Leeds Lens. We have got your latest transfer news today and there is a number of stories to get into as always. We're starting off, we've got a link to Facundo Buonanotte from a really reliable actually South American journalist. So we're going to talk a bit about that and what that sort of suggests for Leeds United and what the link actually is. We're also going to talk a bit about Manor Solomon. I know everybody's talking about Manor Solomon, and in normal cases, if you're in the kitchen maybe, you might go, too many cooks spoil the broth. Well, I would argue, in the Leeds sphere, too many cooks do not spoil the broth, and I might as well discuss Manor Solomon as well. Don't know what that's about. But yeah, we're also going to be talking a bit about a few other players as well. Julian Weigl, who's been linked. Build was saying yesterday that that's not quite over yet. Obviously, we know at the start of the window, Daniel Farke was really keen on Julian Weigl, the sort of 29-year-old German holding midfielders. We'll talk a bit about him. We're also going to talk about Schmidt and Ramazani. With Ramazani especially, there has been a different clause added into the contract that we're going to discuss there, or a lack of clause in the contract, which could be really interesting and really beneficial to Leeds. We'll talk about that. And also, I just want to clarify a few other stories before we get into the full show, which that Dovbyk, who I suggested yesterday was going to Villarreal, which was reported, as now it turns out he's not going to Villarreal anymore. So he's still potentially an available striker for Leeds United if Leeds United wanted to go there. And also, the other one as well is that Uche, who I reported yesterday as well, was going to Wolves. Well, that has fallen apart because apparently he's not been happy with the way the deal's done. So potentially that's still on the table for us as well. So just thought I wanted to clarify them two stories so I don't look like I'm reporting false news. But yeah, let's start with Facundo Buonanotte, though. He's the main story, in my opinion, today. However, if you could help the channel, before we get into it, of course, yeah, if you could help the channel by dropping a like, subscribe, all that good stuff, massive helps the channel. I am trying to hit 1,000 subscribers by the end of the transfer window, which is the 1st of September. So if you could help in that goal, that would be fantastic. And while you're there, if you could also just smash that like button, it would be brilliant because, you know, then it pushes it in the algorithm and allows other people to see this sort of content as well. But yeah, that's the sort of promotion for the video, I guess. But yeah, let's start with Facundo Buonanotte. So it's been reported by a journalist called César Luis Merlo, who is a really reliable, actually, South American journalist. I have searched into him to make sure I'm not sort of feeding you guys nonsense stories. So there is potential in this story, and he's suggesting that Leeds and West Ham lead the race for Facundo Buonanotte. For the record as well, a few other things on this journalist. He's got 475,000 followers on X, so he's someone that's big in the South American space, of course. I'm not sure followers always match up with credibility, as we know from a few journalists we've talked about earlier in the window who don't actually exist as people, yet have got big sort of X accounts. But yeah, apparently he's a really respected, anyway, South American journalist. But yeah, as I said, he said that Leeds and West Ham lead the race for Buonanotte. With the situation before this story with Buonanotte, we know he was close to the Lyon move, but we also know that in Brighton's case, who obviously control the player because it's going to be a loan move, they would rather send him to the Premier League. We also know that Dortmund as well have been linked, but again, Brighton would prefer him to come to the Premier League. And I think the reason for that, obviously in Brighton's case, is that the football all across in different countries is played differently. In the Italian league, of course, it's a bit more slower, more tactical, more focused on defence. Bundesliga is a bit more sort of actually like the Premier League, high press style, really physical, aggressive, a bit like the Premier League, I guess. And the French league probably is a bit of a lower sort of standard than of course the Premier League and potentially the Bundesliga, etc. So I think that's obviously why they want to keep Buonanotte in England, because obviously it's a similar sort of football, so then it'll be an easier transition when he does go back into the Brighton squad potentially next summer. But in terms of Buonanotte in a whole, probably for what he can bring to Leeds United, I think he's a really, really solid option. And I know we've been linked to a few bits, and I know Adam Pope mentioned Buonanotte as well a few weeks back, but I think he mentioned at the time it was unlikely because he'd end up going to a European club. But yeah, I think this is a fantastic update for Leeds in terms of, I think if Leeds could get Buonanotte, it'd be a great signing. And people might be opposed to it, but I'll tell you a few reasons why I think that Buonanotte would be good. In terms of his numbers last year, he got 5 goals, 2 assists, but he only actually played 14 times. People might go, well, that's because he's rubbish. It's not at all. He was brought in by Steve Cooper, who played him, and he actually played really well under Cooper. Cooper then got sacked. Van Nistelrooy came into Leicester, and he wasn't favoured by Van Nistelrooy, and he probably should have moved on in January, if we're being totally honest. And the other thing that I like about Buonanotte is his ability to play multiple positions. He obviously is a number 10 by trade. However, he also can appear on the right-hand side, which is really interesting because we know Leeds United, from what Daniel Farke said in his press conference, are looking for someone who can play on the right-hand side, but also sort of come in as if he's a number 10. Well, Buonanotte can do that. But when I look at Buonanotte as a player more than all of that, I think what he would bring Leeds United more than anything is that football IQ in the final third. This is a guy with really, really high football intelligence. Knowing what he wants to do when he receives the ball better than potentially other players. Like, I think when I look at our sort of final third play that we've seen in the Premier League so far, the likes of Dan James, yes, are really quick in terms of physical attribute, but can they keep up with that speed in terms of actually the football IQ and decision making? I don't think we've seen that with Dan James, and I think that's always going to be the issue in the Premier League. Buonanotte is not going to have that issue. This is a guy who's really clever, can take the ball in half space, can see a pass like potentially other players can't. Potentially Dan James wouldn't be able to. And as I always said, that's his main attribute, and he's really good actually. And if he come into Leeds, I'd like him in that 10 role because he's really good at sort of occupying that space between their number 6 and obviously their defence in that little pocket there and picking up the ball and sort of threading little passes through. I said it'd be a really, really nice addition for Leeds. And it's one I really, really do hope we can get over the line because, as I said, in terms of a profile like that, I think we really lack it. I've sort of mentioned potentially number 10's maybe not the way we should go with it. However, as I said, he can play on the right-hand side, and that's where he picked up a lot of his sort of goal contributions last season for Leicester, was on that sort of right-hand side. So, yeah. Overall, for me, really like this edition, and I hope it happens. Although I have still, as you can see on the signing scale, wrong way around, still got Buonanotte at a 1 out of 5. I don't think it's potentially that likely. Although, as I said, this South American journalist, from the research I've done, is really sort of is well known and sort of credible. So I think there could be something in it. But let's wait and see. Hey, anyway, moving on to Manor Solomon. Yeah. If people watch this channel, which I'm sure a lot of you guys have now a couple of times, you'll know I'm not big on Manor Solomon. I'm really not. Like, there's a few reasons why it is. But let's talk about the positives, and I'll break down what people have said as to why I won't go for Solomon. People say that he knows Daniel Farke and he knows the system well. Okay. My comeback to that is the system has changed this summer. We no longer, last season, the whole season, we played with a definite number 10 in Brendan Aronson, and we played with two sort of a 6 and an 8. That's sort of how we played. This season, we've seen a completely different approach. We've got a number 6 who at the weekend was Gruev. In the first game was Ampadu, and then we've got 2 number 8s who get up and down the pitch in Tanaka and Stack. That is a completely different system. And your link play, like we saw a lot of times last year, Solomon pass the ball in Aronson, get it back, and maybe take a shot or do a number of different actions. That ability and that sort of that way of playing and the link up play between the number 10 and Solomon out wide will not be there this season. So it's a very different situation. So when people say he knows the system, it's a completely different system. The other thing that I don't like is people go, well, he's built up relationships with people in the team. Okay, fine, he's built up relationships. Firpo was the left back that he played with last season. Obviously, that's a huge link up for Solomon. Firpo's no longer there. It's Gabriel Goodmanson, who's never played with Solomon in his life. So that's one thing to bear in mind as well in terms of that. Also, like I mentioned, with the number 10, we don't play with the number 10 anymore. So the link up he's learnt to do with Brendan Aronson in that 10 at times, we won't see that anymore because Brendan Aronson isn't playing in the 10 this year. And also, the other person you'd probably link with is Pro up front as well, who again, I would expect when DCL's back for him to be the starting striker. So again, Solomon hasn't played with him. So the whole debate about, well, he knows the system and he knows the players. Well, he doesn't know the system because it's a new system. And he doesn't know the players because it's different players. So I don't really get that argument. And I guess he did well. And I get he did well for us last year. I think he got 23 goal contributions. I think it was 10 goals and 13 assists, which was a terrific season. But that doesn't always mean that it's going to sort of work in the sort of Premier League. The other thing that I don't get about this Solomon sort of debate is that, all right, potentially would work, but he's a left winger. We've just brought Okafor as a left winger. Why are we then buying another? We've got Okafor there. We've got Nonto there. We've got Jack Harrison who can play there. We've just let Ramazani go to Valencia because we've got too many left-sided players. Why do we now need to go get another one? We don't. We need a right winger. And then people will go, well, you could play him on the right. The problem with playing Solomon on the right is that he's not particularly quick. And if he's not quick and he plays on the right hand side and he's right footed, the way you beat a man, if you're what you do if you're playing on the right hand side, like Dan James does, by the way, when he plays on the right hand side, you're a byline. When you're hitting the byline and crossing the ball to the back post, chipping it to the back post, that is the way you could play. And you could say that could work with Solomon, but he hasn't got the pace, in my opinion, to beat a man on the outside. His better way of sort of being useful is cutting in on the left hand side and taking a shot, which we saw a number of times last year. I remember the Preston game later on in the season when he cut in and had a great shot, obviously scored in like the 6th minute. Game we ended up winning, which was massively important. But as I said, when you've now got Okafor, who you think would operate on that left-hand side, I can't see Solomon with his attributes being able to work on the right. It doesn't work for me. Go buy a right winger. And as I said, if you're playing on the right, all right, he's played with Bogle before, but he's never played on the right for Leeds. So why, when we potentially didn't think he was good enough to play on the right for Leeds in the Champ, would we then play him on the right in the Prem? I just don't get this signing. I really don't get it. And I would be quite displeased with it if we got it over the line, because I just think it's a waste of money. I don't think we need a left-sided player. I don't think he can play on the right. And even if we did need a left-sided player, I don't think he's quite good enough and got a number of attributes that he misses to play on that left-hand side. I just don't think he has. So that's for me, my opinion on Solomon. I just won't go there. And I don't quite, unless you think he's actually really good, which I know some people do, in terms of some of the reasons I've seen for going for him, in terms of his sort of understanding of the system and all that sort of stuff, I don't get, because it's a different system, it's different players. So I don't know, I just thought that's something we mentioned, because I know people said a lot about Solomon, and there has been a lot of discussion about him. But yeah, I'm just not quite sure, personally. Anyway, let's move on to another story then, which is about outgoings. Let's move on to outgoings. So, Isaac Schmidt, of course, we knew this was going to happen. When Leeds got a backup fullback in, Schmidt would be allowed to leave. Makes sense from Leeds United. He's leaving for £3 million. So that is something. We bought him, I think, for about £4 million last summer. So I think on PSR we'll probably break about even, which is okay. And finally, a sale, because I've talked about this in yesterday's video massively, that we need sales now. We really, really, really need sales. This can't be the first one. We need more, because what we haven't done is we're not funding the transfer window with outgoings. Look, if you look at the other clubs, for example, Sunderland have sold Bellingham. They've sold Watson, of course, Tommy Watson. They've sold Ekwa for a combined, I think, 20 million between them two and about 30 million for Bellingham. So you got about 50 million quid there. Burnley have sold Trafford for about 30 million as well. So they're both bringing in money. And yes, they've spent more, but they've also brought in a lot more. So that on PSR, they're doing a lot better than we are. And in terms of net spend, they're doing a lot better than we are as well. Not by much on Sunderland. I think they're about 90 million net spend. We're about 100. But we've got to start finding a way to bring players in and get players out of the club for values. We have to do it. We've got so many now. Our squad's so inflated. And we're also getting really close now, obviously, to that mark of 25 players that you're allowed in your squad. And we're getting really close to that now, because we haven't offloaded well enough this summer. It's the worst thing we've done in the transfer window, as I said yesterday. Even people were mentioning yesterday's vision, and they're absolutely right. Like Giarbi and Greenwoods and Melier still here, and potentially Alex Cairns if you're not going to get rid of him. But you probably would get rid of Melier instead. But there's so many that are still at this football club that need to be moved on. And that's before you go into the first teams. Like I talked yesterday, could you move a Perot on who's potentially won't be good enough for the Premier League? Could you move a Dan James? I mean, we won't like this, but you've got to be ruthless, because would you rather Dan James on the right-hand side and a £50 million winger to help him, or sell him and get a £30 million winger and get Bakwa? What would you rather? I know which one I'd rather, because you've got to go to that next level. And as I said, every other club has sold players this summer except Leeds United in terms of promoted clubs, because they know that you've got to get money in so you can spend. And Sunderland have spent way more than it is. I think they've spent 140 million, but they've brought in £50 million worth of sales. And a lot of them are PSR. Tommy Watson, they got for free, came through the academy. Bellingham, they bought for like 3 million quid, but with his sort of deteriorating on his contract, he's probably got a PSR of $1 million or something this summer, and they've made 29 million on a PSR book sheet this summer. And Ekwa, I think they bought for a couple of million and sold for 8. So, as I said, they've generated money, Sunderland, and they've generated money on the PSR books, which is massive. And Leeds United haven't done that. And people go and spend, and that's brilliant, and we need to spend. But you can't just spend, because you will break FFP, and we'll be getting a points deduction if they do that. So what Leeds United don't need to do is, rather than spend, sell, and then start spending again. And that's what they need to do. So yeah, Schmidt's gone, fine, but we need to get some more on. Ramazani, the update there is that he is going to Valencia. But the best thing about this deal is, and people will go, well, you just sold to sale and you're not selling Ramazani. Ramazani would have sold for such a crap fee this summer that it's worth a loan because you could get treble your money. I've said this before. Anyway, with the loan, there was potential for an option to buy. I hated that idea. I thought it was really bad because his stock's so low, the option to buy wouldn't be high enough potentially for Leeds United to get a good enough fee to warrant the loan in comparison to potentially what a sale would offer this summer. So I'm glad that they've removed the option to buy. It was the correct thing to do, which is the news. So Ramazani is going to go to Valencia, but it's not going to be with an option to buy. He's also going to team up with, I believe, Carlos Corberán, who's now at Valencia, who is a really good manager. So it's nice for him to play under a really good coach as well. Someone who obviously knows about Leeds as well in Corberán. It's a perfect move for him. It really is. Top flight football, really good coach. Someone who actually knows about Leeds United. Perfect. Get him out there and get him playing football. And hopefully, as I said, he can then come back next summer and even be sold for a lot more, potentially 20 million plus, which I do think is easily worth. Not right now because his stock's so low, but that's what he could get to. Or obviously he plays really well at Valencia, comes back and plays for Leeds. So yeah, that's a good story all round. That's gone really well. In terms of a few other stories that I should have mentioned at the start, Bakwa looks like he's off to Forest. We've been done by Sasha and his agents, to be honest. Sasha obviously gets information from player agents, and we saw this with El Canoes that he spiked up interest by saying Leeds United were going to trigger it. Well, he spiked up interest again, saying Leeds United were pushing him really close to Bakwa, and of course Forest had come back on the table and took him off us. Brilliant. Was the whole intention of the tweet, probably, in my opinion. That doesn't mean Sasha's a bad journalist, by the way. It just means that's the sources he's getting from the agents that he talks to get the transfer news. A lot of journalists, by the way, work with agents. That's how they work. Like Romano's got agents on the book as well, tons of them. That's where he gets his stories from. But Sasha's been told a story to drill up interest for Forest for them to go back in. It's so obvious to me. But it's a shame because I don't think Bakwa's now going to happen. Probably not going to be on the signing scale for much longer, I wouldn't have thought. Anyway, moving on to a few other things in midfield. Julian Weigl has been linked. Now, this is something that I like because when we talk about sales, people go, we can't sell Gruev. We can sell Gruev for sure. 100% we can sell Gruev. We just can't get the fee that we all think potentially we could get. So for me, I would sell Gruev for about 5 million quid, and I would go and buy someone like Julian Weigl because he's potentially a better player than Gruev, who we know isn't good enough, and he can come in and be Amphadu's replacement if he gets injured. That's what we should be doing, by the way. That's how we should operate. And people will go, yeah, but Gruev's £5 million. Who are you going to get for 5 million quid that's any good? You buy someone who's more experienced, because if you buy someone at Weigl 29, but even if you went to 30 or 32, these players do not have a high transfer fee because they're old. However, they can still be good players. Like Xhaka at sort of 22 is worth 80 million quid, but because he's 32, he's worth 17, and obviously Sunderland can get him. And we've got to exploit that in different ways. So we've got to sell Gruev for 5 million and bring in someone who's older now, who we can get on the cheap because obviously because he hasn't got the ROI that it comes with, which is fine for us because we lose 5 million, but at least then we get a good backup for Ampadu, of course. So that's what I'd be doing. So for me, I would move Gruev on and go get someone like Julian Weigl, who has been linked by Build in the last sort of saying that Leeds United are still interested. Go do it. That's the signing we should go do. The reporting that Leeds United would need is between 4.2 million and 8.4 million, which is a bit of a sort of weird sum. I don't know, it's such a wide sort of mark, but maybe you could get him for 5 million. So that would be perfect. Sell Gruev, bring in Julian Weigl. That's what I'd do. Anyway, but yeah, that is pretty much the Leeds United news today. Thought I'd do it a bit quicker today because I think these shows do want to drag, and I don't want to drag them too much. So I hope you've enjoyed the sort of quicker style. But yeah, thanks all for watching as always, and I'll catch you all tomorrow for some more Leeds United news, and of course Leeds United play tonight. So I will be doing instant match reaction for that game like usual. Anyway, thanks all for watching, and I will see you all later. Bye for now.